The smell of grilled chicken and sweet barbecue sauce drifted through the backyard of the modest house on Maple Street. Marcus Johnson flipped burgers on the grill while his wife Diane arranged potato salad on the picnic table. Their two kids, Aisha and Jamal, chased each other around the yard, their laughter mixing with the old-school R&B playing from a small speaker. It was a perfect Saturday afternoon, until it wasn't. "Excuse me, excuse me." The voice came from the fence line, sharp, demanding. Marcus turned to see his neighbor, Carol Henderson, standing on her porch with her arms crossed. Her face was pinched tight with that expression he'd come to know too well in the 6 months they'd lived here. "Can I help you, Mrs. Henderson?" Marcus called out, keeping his voice even. "You certainly can. This noise is absolutely unacceptable. Some of us are trying to enjoy our weekend in peace." Diane walked over, wiping her hands on her apron. "Mrs. Henderson, it's only 3 in the afternoon. We're just having a small family barbecue." "Small?" Carol's voice rose an octave. "You've got music blaring, children screaming, and that smell is coming right into my house. This is a respectable neighborhood. We have standards here." Marcus felt the familiar tightness in his chest. He'd dealt with people like Carol his whole life. The ones who clutched their purses when he walked by, the ones who followed him in stores, the ones who always had a problem with his very existence. "The music's barely audible from your yard," he said calmly, "and kids laugh. That's what they do. Don't you dare talk back to me. I've lived on this street for 20 years, and we've never had these kinds of problems until your family moved in." Diane's hand found Marcus's arm, squeezing gently, their silent language. "Stay calm. Don't give her what she wants." "Mrs. Henderson, we have every right to use our backyard," Diane said. "We're not breaking any laws or ordinances." Carol's eyes narrowed. "We'll see about that." She disappeared into her house. Marcus and Diane exchanged worried glances. They'd seen this movie before, knew how it ended. "Daddy, why is that lady always mad at us?" Aisha asked, her 7-year-old face scrunched with confusion. Before Marcus could answer, they heard it. Sirens, getting closer. "You've got to be kidding me," Marcus muttered. 2 police cars pulled up in front of their house. 4 officers emerged, hands resting on their belts as they approached the open gate to the backyard. "We received a complaint about a disturbance," the lead officer said. He was young, maybe 30, with cold blue eyes that swept over the scene like he was already writing his report. "There's no disturbance, officer," Marcus said, his heart pounding but his voice steady. "Years of practice. We're just having a family barbecue." "Sir, we need you to turn off the music and disperse. This gathering is creating a public nuisance." "A public nuisance?" Diane's voice cracked. "We're in our own backyard with our children." Carol had emerged from her house again, standing on her porch with a satisfied smile. She'd called in reinforcements and was about to enjoy the show. "Ma'am, I'm going to need you to calm down," the officer said to Diane. "I am calm. We're the ones who should be upset. We pay taxes. We own this home. And we're being harassed for cooking in our own yard." The officer's hand moved closer to his weapon. The gesture wasn't lost on Marcus. He'd seen the news. He knew how these situations could spiral. "Kids, go inside," Marcus said quietly. "But Daddy—" "Now, Aisha, take your brother." The children hurried into the house, and Marcus could see Aisha's face in the window, pressed against the glass, watching everything. "Sir, I'm going to need to see your identification," the officer said. "For what? I haven't done anything wrong." "Don't make this difficult." Marcus was reaching for his wallet when a car pulled up. Not a police car, a sleek black Mercedes with tinted windows. The kind of car that didn't belong on their middle-class street. The driver's door opened, and a woman stepped out. She was perhaps 70, maybe older, with silver hair pulled back in an elegant bun. She wore a simple but obviously expensive black dress and pearls. Her face was lined with age, but her dark eyes were sharp as broken glass. She walked toward them with the kind of authority that made everyone freeze. Even the officers straightened slightly. "Is there a problem here?" Her accent was thick Italian, her voice carrying an edge that suggested she wasn't really asking. "Ma'am, this is police business," the lead officer said, though his tone had lost some of its certainty. The woman ignored him completely. She walked straight to Marcus and Diane, studying their faces with an intensity that was almost uncomfortable. "You are the Johnson family, yes?" she asked. "Yes, ma'am," Marcus said, confused. He'd never seen this woman before in his life. She turned to the officers, and something in her posture changed. She stood taller, and the air around her seemed to thicken with unspoken threat. "These people are under my protection," she said simply. "You will leave. Now." The lead officer actually laughed. "Ma'am, I don't know who you think you are, but I am Vittoria Calabrese." The name hung in the air like a thunderclap. The officer's face went pale. Even Carol, still watching from her porch, seemed to shrink back slightly. Marcus had no idea who Vittoria Calabrese was, but clearly everyone else did. "Mrs. Calabrese," the officer stammered, "we didn't know. We were just responding to a complaint." "A complaint," Vittoria repeated, her voice dripping with contempt. She turned slowly to look at Carol. "From that woman, I assume." Carol's satisfied smile had vanished completely. Vittoria walked toward Carol's porch with measured steps. When she spoke again, her voice was soft, but it carried perfectly in the sudden silence. "You like to make phone calls, I see. Perhaps I should make some phone calls of my own." Carol's hands trembled as she gripped her porch railing. "I don't know what you're talking about. I simply called about a noise violation." "You called to harass your neighbors," Vittoria interrupted, "because their skin is darker than yours. Don't insult me by pretending otherwise." The officers were already backing toward their cars. Whatever power Carol thought she had evaporated the moment Vittoria Calabrese arrived. "We'll be going now," the lead officer said quickly. "Sorry for the disturbance." Within minutes, the police cars were gone. Carol had retreated into her house, slamming the door hard enough to rattle the windows. Marcus and Diane stood frozen, trying to process what just happened. Vittoria turned back to them, and her severe expression softened slightly. "May I sit? These old bones don't stand as well as they used to." "Of course," Diane said quickly, gesturing to the picnic table. "Can I get you something to drink? Water, lemonade?" "Lemonade would be lovely, thank you." As Diane hurried inside, Marcus sat across from this mysterious woman who just saved them from God knows what. Up close, he could see the strength in her weathered face, the intelligence in those dark eyes. "Mrs. Calabrese, I don't understand. How do you know us? Why did you help?" Vittoria took the glass of lemonade from Diane with a gracious nod. She sipped slowly, as if gathering her thoughts, or her memories. 40 years ago, she began. "I was not the woman you see before you. I was young, newly arrived in this country, barely speaking English. My husband, Antonio, had brought us to America with promises of a better life." She paused, her fingers tracing the condensation on the glass. "We had nothing. Antonio worked construction during the day, and I cleaned houses at night. We lived in a tiny apartment in South Philadelphia, saving every penny to bring the rest of our family over from Palermo." Marcus and Diane listened, wondering where this story was going. One winter, Antonio was injured on a construction site. Bad injury. His supervisor refused to help, said Antonio was careless, threatened to have him deported if he made trouble. "We had no money for a doctor, no insurance, nowhere to turn." Vittoria's voice grew stronger, more intense. "I was cleaning an office building one night when I collapsed. Exhaustion, hunger, fear, everything caught up with me. I fell down a flight of stairs and lay there in the dark, certain I would die alone in a country that didn't want me." She looked directly at Marcus. "Your father found me." Marcus felt like the ground had shifted beneath him. My father? Samuel Johnson. He was working night security at that building. He found me, called an ambulance with his own phone, rode with me to the hospital. When they said I needed to pay before they'd treat me, he used his credit card, money he didn't have. Diane's hand found Marcus's under the table. But he didn't stop there, Vittoria continued. He visited Antonio and me every day, brought food, helped Antonio find a lawyer who got him compensation from the construction company. Your father never asked for anything in return, never treated us like charity cases. He treated us like family. Marcus's eyes burned. His father had died 5 years ago, and he'd never mentioned any of this. When I asked him why help strangers who could never repay him, you know what he said? Vittoria smiled at the memory. Because it's right. Because when good people do nothing, evil wins. Because someday, someone might help my son when he needs it. The weight of those words settled over the backyard. Your father saved more than our lives that winter. He saved our future. Antonio recovered. We brought our family over, built our businesses. And I never forgot Samuel Johnson's face, his kindness, his dignity. Vittoria reached across the table and took Marcus's hand. When I heard that Samuel's son had moved to this neighborhood, when I heard that terrible woman was making your lives difficult, I knew it was time to repay an old debt. You've been watching over us? Marcus asked. I have people who keep me informed. This is still my city, Mr. Johnson. Philadelphia may have changed, but some of us remember the old ways, the ways that matter. Loyalty, honor, debts paid. Aisha and Jamal had crept back outside, drawn by the calmer voices. They peeked around the corner of the house. Come here, children, Vittoria said gently. Don't be afraid of an old woman. They approached shyly. Vittoria studied their faces with that same intense scrutiny she'd given their parents. You look like your grandfather, she said to Jamal. He had that same thoughtful expression. And you, she turned to Aisha, you have his courage. I can see it. She stood slowly and Marcus rushed to help her. Mrs. Calabrese, thank you doesn't seem like enough. Then don't thank me. Live well. Raise these beautiful children to be like their grandfather. That is thanks enough. She started toward her car, then paused. Oh, and Mr. Johnson, your neighbor will not trouble you again. I promise you that. The way she said it made Marcus believe her completely. As the Mercedes pulled away, Diane wrapped her arms around Marcus from behind. Your dad never told you about any of this? Never. Not once. Marcus wiped his eyes. He just lived it every day, helping people, being kind, never expecting anything back. But the afternoon wasn't over yet. The next morning, Marcus woke to find his car tires slashed. All 4 of them, flat and ruined in the driveway. She wouldn't, Diane said, staring out the window in disbelief. She would, Marcus said grimly. And she did. But when he called the police to file a report, something strange happened. The dispatcher was overly polite, almost nervous. An officer arrived within 10 minutes, unheard of in their neighborhood, and took detailed notes with genuine concern. We'll investigate this thoroughly, Mr. Johnson, the officer promised, and we'll be increasing patrols on your street. Word of Vittoria Calabrese's involvement had clearly spread through the department. Carol, however, wasn't finished. If direct confrontation wouldn't work, she'd try another approach. That Tuesday, Marcus received a call from his supervisor at the accounting firm where he'd worked for 3 years. Marcus, we need to talk. There's been a complaint filed with HR. His stomach dropped. What kind of complaint? A client claims you made inappropriate comments during last month's audit. They're demanding we remove you from their account. That's ridiculous. Which client? His supervisor hesitated. Henderson Properties, LLC. Of course. Carol's husband owned a small real estate company that Marcus's firm had recently taken on. He'd done their quarterly review just 4 weeks ago, and everything had been professional and routine. "This is retaliation," Marcus said. "Her wife is our neighbor. She's been harassing us." "I believe you, Marcus, but my hands are tied. The client is threatening to pull their entire account if we don't take action. I'm going to have to put you on administrative leave while we investigate." Administrative leave, the corporate version of guilty until proven innocent. Marcus sat in his car outside the office, his hands shaking on the steering wheel. Carol was using her husband's business to destroy his career, and there was nothing he could do about it. When he got home, Diane was in tears. Aisha had come home from school crying. Some of the other kids had been whispering, saying their family was in trouble with the police, that they were criminals. "Where are they getting this?" Diane demanded. They found out that evening when a neighbor 3 doors down, Mrs. Patterson, knocked on their door with an uncomfortable expression. "I thought you should know," she said quietly. "Carol's been telling people that you're drug dealers, that the police were here investigating you, that the only reason you weren't arrested is because you have connections to organized crime." She'd twisted the entire story, turned Vittoria's protection into proof of criminality. Marcus felt the walls closing in. This was exactly what Carol wanted, to make their lives so miserable they'd leave, to push them out of her neighborhood through lies and manipulation. That night, he sat at the kitchen table with his head in his hands. "Maybe we should just move," he said quietly. "Find somewhere else. Start over." "No." Diane's voice was firm. "We bought this house. This is our home. We're not running because some racist woman can't handle having black neighbors. She's destroying my career, Di. She's hurting our kids. Then we fight back. But how? They were ordinary people against someone with money, influence, and no conscience." The answer came the next morning in the form of a phone call, an unknown number. "Mr. Johnson, this is Detective Maria Torres. I'm with the Financial Crimes Unit. I understand you've been having some trouble with a neighbor named Carol Henderson." Marcus sat up straight. "Yes, but how did you—" "I received an interesting package yesterday. Documents related to Henderson Properties LLC, tax irregularities, fraudulent deductions, some concerning connections to shell companies, the kind of thing that warrants a full investigation." "I don't understand. Who sent you this package?" There was a pause on the other end of the line. "Let's just say a concerned citizen with considerable resources and very good accountants. Someone who doesn't appreciate people who abuse their power." "Vittoria." "There's more," Detective Torres continued. "We've also received complaints about your treatment at work. Someone's been asking questions about whether Henderson Properties threatened your employer. Corporate intimidation is taken very seriously." Marcus could barely process what he was hearing. "Mr. Johnson, I can't make any promises, but I wanted you to know that the Henderson family is about to have a very difficult few months, and your employer will be receiving a visit from some federal friends of mine about their handling of your situation." That afternoon, Marcus's supervisor called back. "Marcus, there's been a development. We're terminating our relationship with Henderson Properties effective immediately, and we'd like you back in the office tomorrow with a formal apology." But the real shock came that evening when Carol's husband, Robert Henderson, pulled into their driveway. He looked like he'd aged 10 years in 3 days. He knocked on the door, and when Marcus answered, Robert's face was pale and drawn. "Please," he said, "I need to talk to you about my wife before this gets any worse." Robert Henderson stood on the porch, his expensive suit wrinkled, his eyes red-rimmed. Marcus debated slamming the door in his face, but something about the man's defeated posture made him hesitate. "You've got 5 minutes," Marcus said. Robert stepped inside, and Diane emerged from the kitchen, her expression cold. "Mr. Henderson," she said, "come to threaten us some more?" "No, I came to apologize and to beg you not to press charges." Marcus crossed his arms. "Charges for what exactly?" "Carol told me everything. The lies she spread about you. The complaint she had me file through my company. She said it was just a neighborly dispute, that you were the ones causing problems. Robert's voice cracked. I didn't know. I swear I didn't know the extent of what she was doing. Your wife is racist, Diane said bluntly, and you enabled her. I know. God help me, I know. Robert sank onto their couch uninvited, his head in his hands. The federal investigators came today. They're auditing every transaction my company has made for the past 5 years. My lawyer says I could face serious charges. My business partners are already distancing themselves. Good, Marcus said without sympathy. I deserve it. But Carol, she doesn't understand what she's done, who she's crossed. She thinks Vittoria Calabrese is just some old woman making empty threats. Then your wife is a fool, said a voice from the doorway. They all turned. Vittoria stood there, having entered so quietly none of them had heard. Behind her stood 2 men in dark suits, their presence making the small living room feel even smaller. Robert Henderson went white as a sheet. Mrs. Calabrese, please, I'll make this right. I'll convince Carol to apologize, to stop. Your wife is beyond convincing, Mr. Henderson. I've dealt with people like her for 50 years. Bullies who think their comfort matters more than other people's dignity, who use the system as a weapon because they know it was designed to protect them. Vittoria walked further into the room, and Robert actually shrank back. You want to know why the police responded so quickly to your wife's call? Why they came ready for trouble? Vittoria's voice was sharp as a blade. Because the system is broken. Because a white woman's complaint about a black family carries more weight than it should. Your wife knew that. She counted on it. I'll divorce her, Robert said desperately. I'll leave her with nothing. You'll do no such thing, Vittoria interrupted. You'll go home to your wife, and tomorrow morning both of you will attend a community meeting at the Johnsons' house. 10 o'clock. A meeting? Yes. With me, the Johnsons, and several other interested parties. Vittoria smiled, but there was no warmth in it. I think it's time your wife learned about consequences. Robert left, looking like a man walking to his own execution. The next morning, Marcus and Diane cleaned their house nervously, unsure what to expect. At exactly 10 o'clock, cars began arriving. Vittoria came first, accompanied by her 2 suited associates. Then came Detective Torres. Then Marcus's supervisor from work, looking uncomfortable. Then Mrs. Patterson and 3 other neighbors. Finally, Robert arrived with Carol, who wore her usual expression of superiority despite her husband's obvious anxiety. What is this? Carol demanded, looking around the living room. Robert said we were coming to apologize, not attend some kind of trial. Sit down, Mrs. Henderson, Vittoria said quietly. Something in her tone made Carol obey. Vittoria stood at the center of the room, like a judge about to deliver a verdict. Mrs. Henderson, you have spent months making your neighbors' lives miserable. You called the police on a family barbecue, hoping to frighten them. When that failed, you spread lies about them being criminals. You used your husband's business to threaten Mr. Johnson's employment. You even vandalized their property, though you were foolish enough to do it on a street with security cameras. Carol's face went red. I don't have to listen to this. Yes, you do. Vittoria's voice cut through the room. Because I have evidence of everything. The slashed tires caught on your own doorbell camera. The social media posts where you bragged to your friends about dealing with the problem neighbors. The emails you sent encouraging other residents to complain about the Johnsons. Detective Torres stepped forward, holding a folder. Mrs. Henderson, I have a warrant here for your arrest on charges of vandalism, harassment, and filing false police reports. Carol's superiority finally cracked. You can't arrest me. You're what? Vittoria asked coldly. Untouchable? Above the law? Let me tell you something about real power, Mrs. Henderson. Real power isn't calling the police on people who look different from you. Real power is knowing when to show mercy, and you've shown none." She turned to Detective Torres. "However, I'd like to offer Mrs. Henderson an alternative." Carol looked up with desperate hope. "You will sell your house and move from this neighborhood within 90 days. You will make a public apology to the Johnsons at the next community association meeting. You will donate $50,000 to the local NAACP chapter in Samuel Johnson's name. And you will complete 200 hours of community service at a cultural center of the Johnsons' choosing. And if I refuse, then Detective Torres arrests you right now. Your husband's business faces the full weight of federal investigation, and I make some phone calls that ensure everyone in Philadelphia knows exactly what kind of person you are." Carol looked at her husband, who wouldn't meet her eyes. She looked at the neighbors, who stared back with a mixture of satisfaction and pity. "Fine," she whispered. The community association meeting was packed. Word had spread about Carol Henderson's required public apology, and it seemed like half the neighborhood had shown up to witness it. Marcus sat in the front row with Diane, Aisha, and Jamal. He'd wanted to skip this, to just let Carol slink away quietly, but Vittoria had insisted. "Some lessons need witnesses," she'd said. "Not for revenge, for education." Carol stood at the podium, her face pale, her hands trembling as she held her prepared statement. Robert sat in the back, separated from her by rows of neighbors and an ocean of shame. "I want to apologize to the Johnson family," Carol began, her voice barely audible. She cleared her throat and tried again, louder this time. "I treated you with cruelty and prejudice. I used my privilege as a weapon to make you feel unwelcome in your own home. I called the police knowing they might respond with force. I spread lies about your character. I tried to destroy Mr. Johnson's career." She paused, and for the first time, Marcus saw something like genuine remorse in her expression. "I told myself I was protecting my neighborhood, maintaining standards, preserving property values. But the truth is, I was scared. Scared of change. Scared of people who didn't look like me or live like me. And instead of examining that fear, I weaponized it." Aisha squeezed Marcus's hand. His daughter had heard too much adult ugliness these past months, but maybe she needed to hear this too. Needed to see that sometimes, rarely, people could acknowledge their wrongs. "There's no excuse for what I did," Carol continued. "I can't undo the harm I caused, but I hope the Johnson family knows that I'm deeply, truly sorry, and I hope this community will learn from my mistakes." She stepped down from the podium and walked directly to Marcus. Up close, he could see tears in her eyes. "I'm sorry," she said again, just for him. Marcus looked at this woman who'd made his family's life hell. Part of him wanted to reject her apology, to let her carry that weight forever, but he thought about his father, about the kindness Samuel Johnson had shown to strangers who needed help. "I accept your apology," he said quietly, "and I hope you become a better person." Carol nodded and left quickly, and Marcus knew he'd never see her again. The meeting dissolved into conversations and introductions. Neighbors who'd been too afraid to speak up before came forward to welcome the Johnsons properly. Mrs. Patterson hugged Diane and apologized for not doing more earlier. Vittoria watched from the side of the room, a small smile on her weathered face. After the crowd dispersed, she invited the Johnson family to dinner at her home the following Sunday. The Calabrese estate was stunning, a sprawling property in the suburbs with manicured gardens and a house that spoke of old money and older traditions. But inside it was warm and welcoming, filled with family photos and the smell of homemade Italian cooking. Vittoria's extended family was there, children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren, and they embraced the Johnsons like long-lost relatives. "Your grandfather saved our matriarch," one of Vittoria's grandsons explained to Aisha and Jamal. "That makes you family. Always. Over dinner, pasta that Vittoria had made herself, despite having a full kitchen staff, Marcus found himself seated next to the elderly woman who'd changed everything. "I still can't believe all of this," he said. "How you appeared right when we needed you. I told you, I keep track of Samuel Johnson's family. When I heard you'd moved into that neighborhood, into that woman's territory, I knew trouble would come. I just waited for the right moment." "Why wait? Why not step in earlier?" Vittoria took a sip of wine, considering her answer carefully. "Because some battles people need to fight themselves first. You stood up to those officers with dignity. You didn't back down, didn't let fear make you smaller. Your father would have been proud." "I wish I'd known him better," Marcus admitted. "Really known him. All these stories about the things he did, the people he helped. He never talked about any of it. The best people rarely do. They just live their values every day, in small ways that add up to something extraordinary." Vittoria reached over and patted his hand. "You're doing the same, Marcus, raising your children to be kind, to stand up for what's right, to not let hatred make them hateful. That's how you honor your father's memory." Later, as the evening wound down, Vittoria pulled an envelope from her pocket and handed it to Marcus. "What's this?" "A scholarship fund for Aisha and Jamal's education, from the Calabrese family to the Johnson family. Your father invested in our future. We invest in yours." Marcus tried to refuse, but Vittoria wouldn't hear it. "This is not charity. This is family taking care of family. And you are family now. Always." Driving home that night, Aisha asleep in the back seat and Jamal quietly playing a game on his tablet, Marcus felt something he hadn't felt in months. Peace. "You know what the strangest part of all this is?" Diane said softly. "What's that?" "Carol thought she was protecting her neighborhood from us, but we were never the threat. Her own fear and hatred, that was the real danger all along." Marcus nodded. She was right. Fear made people do terrible things, made them see enemies where there were only neighbors, made them call violence down on families just trying to live their lives. But kindness like his father had shown to strangers in need, that created ripples that lasted generations, that built bridges instead of walls, that protected families 40 years later through the loyalty and gratitude of people who'd never forgotten a single act of human decency. The barbecue grill sat in their backyard, ready for the next family gathering. This time, though, they'd be inviting the whole street. Mrs. Patterson had already offered to bring her famous coleslaw. Other neighbors had asked what they could contribute. Their house was finally becoming a home. Their neighborhood was finally becoming a community. And somewhere, Marcus liked to think, his father was smiling. What would you do if you witnessed a neighbor being treated this way? Would you speak up, or would fear keep you silent? Share your thoughts in the comments.